And I think going forward, the more you can tell that story as a business, the more trust you can build within your community. And of course, you can make a higher product in terms of efficacy. And that's what people want when they're buying these products. Do they feel something or do they not?
I'm Luke Story. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Life Stylist podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you.
Yo, I am super pumped to share with you beekeepersnaturals.com. Now, if you heard episode 175 with founder and CEO Carly Stein, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are the highest quality bee products in the world from Beekeepers Naturals. Now, I've been using bee products for a long time. Back in the 90s, I was rocking like the bee pollen and using kind of gourmet honey over the years and things like that. But until that interview, honestly, I had no idea of the superpowers and the variety of different bee products. So not only do these guys make the cleanest, most organic, most potent bee products, they also have the widest variety of products. So whether it's propolis, which helps you with the immune system, soothing scratchy throats, it's really potent stuff, or the bee pollen, which is a superfood with vitamins and nutrients and gives you energy. It has amino acids and protein, whether it's the raw honey, the royal jelly. They even have a tonic for your brain. I mean, they have a lot of great products over there. So if you're not hip to the power of bee products as a superfood, I want to highly recommend that you get over to beekeepersnaturals.com. And honestly, if you want to just learn all about bees and the industry and how it's done right for ecology and for the environment, definitely go back and listen to episode 175. It's a great episode, and the founder Carly is just brilliant, and she's running a really great operation over there. So I'm very happy to support them on the show. And like all the stuff I always talk about, I use them every day. In fact, I use it too much because I run out of it. Like when I interviewed her, I was like, so I do like a couple tablespoons of the bee powered, which is the really potent one that combines all of the superfoods in the hive into one product. And she's like, dude, the dose for that is half a teaspoon once a day. You're tripping. But, I'm hardcore. Because it just tastes delicious and it gives you like instant energy. So definitely get over to beekeepersnaturals.com. When you're there, if you enter the code LifeStylist, that's one word, LifeStylist, you'll save 15% off your order. So go to beekeepersnaturals.com, enter the code LifeStylist.
I'm so happy right now. You know why? Because my gut is happy. When your gut's happy, your neurotransmitters are working right. You got your serotonin, your dopamine, your melatonin. You're feeling great. This is all thanks to Just Thrive probiotics, man. These things are awesome. You can find them at justthrivehealth.com. The reason they work and why probably most of the probiotics I've been taking for the past 20 years to try to fix my digestion did not work is because they are a spore-based probiotic, meaning you eat them, they get into your gut, they hatch and populate. They have a 100% survivability record, which is really good. Most probiotics you take, honestly, just turn into dust or something. They just don't do anything. So if you've had issues with bloating, gas, leaky gut, digestive problems, Just Thrive probiotics are going to be the magic ticket for you. So again, go to justthrivehealth.com. If you enter the code Luke15, you're going to save 15% off over at justthrivehealth.com. It's a great way to upgrade not only your gut, but all the things related to it, like brain function, your immune system, etc. The good thing about Just Thrive is when you take them, they are going to work. That's justthrivehealth.com. Enter the code Luke15 for 15% off. Well, 2020 is off to a raging start, folks. We're hitting this thing like a steam locomotive going off the rails. Today's episode with Julian Mitchell is no exception. He and his partner Ryan Creed co-founded Life Cykel in 2015 after discovering how to grow gourmet culinary mushrooms from waste coffee grounds. And that has since exploded into a vast knowledge of all things mushrooms. And we are going to cover that in today's show. Before we get started in that, I want to remind you how important it is to join my newsletter. not because I'm going to try to sell you a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have much to sell you at the moment. I'm working on that this year. But what is really great about the newsletter is that you can get the show notes from every single episode delivered right to your inbox every Tuesday and even sometimes on Fridays. Why this is important is, as a listener of podcasts myself, I know that as I'm listening, oftentimes people will drop a resource, whether it be a product or a book or a film or something that I want to check out based on a recommendation from the conversation. And I'll have to stop and screen grab the timestamp on the podcast or try and Google something in my car at a red light and almost get myself into an accident and all kinds of stupid shenanigans that are totally unnecessary if I was just on that podcast newsletter and got their show notes. So what the show notes contain are a bulleted list of everything we talk about, as well as hyperlinks, meaning live links that take you directly to all of the things discussed. And I find this to be very valuable on other podcasts. I know one of my favorites is to go on Ben Greenfield's show notes and look up all the crazy stuff that he's always talking about, because there's so much sort of technical data dropped in those episodes. And speaking of Ben, when I did my recent Christmas episode with Ben, where he came to my house and we did a deep biohacking dive on the entire property, which, by the way, is on my website under the Ben Greenfield episode. There's a 2-hour documentary video of that whole thing. But in that episode, we went all out and dropped, I don't know, there's probably 50 links in there or something, because we talked about so many different modalities of healing, etc. So to get on the newsletter, for the old lukestory.com information, it's super easy, guys. If you're on a US phone, all you have to do is text the word lifestylist to the number 44222. That's one word, lifestylist. And the weird phone number you're going to text is 44222. Text that word to that number, and you're going to get an opt-in to enter your name and email, and you will be on the newsletter. If you're not on a US phone, you can simply go to lukestory.com/newsletter. That's lukestory.com/newsletter. And I'm very respectful with the newsletters. I only email you when there's something important and high value to share. So that's what's up with that. Let's talk about what we discuss in this conversation with Julian Mitchell. Creating the future of food, the most nutritious strains of mushrooms, why it's so difficult to grow mushrooms on your own, as many aspiring trippers have learned, exactly what you need to know if you do want to try and grow your own mushrooms. We discuss the incredible new documentary, Fantastic Fungi, why mushrooms aren't plants, but rather their own kingdom, the potential risk of contamination from mushrooms grown on coffee grounds or other substrate, how to choose high-quality mushroom products, the dual extraction process that Life Cykel uses to get the medicine out of the fungi, how to identify whether your mushroom-based products are using high-quality mushrooms or not. There's a lot of sort of controversy and cutting of corners in the mushroom industry specifically, and there's a lot of valuable information given there. The importance of researching the supply chain of the health products that you use, how different functional mushrooms can be used in your biohacking tool belt, why lion's mane is the closest you can get to the psychedelic mushroom, and why it's often added to a stack for microdosing said psychedelic mushrooms. And finally, mushroom biotechnology applications for a healthy planet beyond growing mushrooms to eat, which is a really fascinating topic we get into at the end. So make sure to listen all the way through, because it gets nutty in there. So that's what's going on in today's show. Again, join the newsletter by texting the word lifestylist to the number 44222 or going to lukestory.com/newsletter. And finally, I'm guessing that by the end of this episode, you might want to try out some of these Life Cykel medicinal mushrooms yourself. For a limited time, you can go to lifecykel.com. That's LIFECYKEL. That's LIFECYKEL.com, lifecykel.com. Enter the code LukeSave20, and you're going to get a little hookup from our guest today, as I always try to deliver. If somebody, owns a company, is talking about a product, that's just how we roll. I think I talk about this in the interview with Julian, but I freaking love these mushrooms. In fact, I go through, they're like a liquid extract. We show it in the YouTube video. By the way, there's a YouTube video for 99.9% of the interviews I do. So you can watch these conversations. And I have recently stepped up my video game, bought a couple extra cameras, and, it's going to be looking quite professional in the very near future. I don't remember if we shot this one with the new gear or not, but I'm sitting in my studio here with like 40 tripods around me. It's a disaster, but it's going to look nice and sound really nice. So you can see the products for yourself. But anyway, back to the point, I'm just raging through specifically the lion's mane because I'm really focusing on brain health and productivity and focus and things like that. And that's what it's really good for. So these products are dope. Again, if you want to check them out, go to lifecykel.com. The code's Luke, save 20 for 20% off. And with that, you are about to have your mind blown with someone who knows a lot about mushrooms, whether they be culinary, psychedelic, medicinal, or used again from the biotechnology standpoint. So I'm really excited to deliver this episode with Julian Mitchell. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks, Luke. Great to be here.
Here we are once again. So Julian Mitchell, our guest today. This is our second time hanging out. You came over once before and we just did a full chill session and download. And I realized, this guy knows a lot about a lot of things. I need to get him on the show. So I'm glad you're able to make it here today.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm always excited to talk mushrooms.
Yeah. And I'm always excited to talk to someone with a different accent too. Obviously, you're from Kentucky, I'm getting? Or?
Just south of Kentucky, Australia.
All right. Cool, man. So, let's just jump right in and talk about how you got your start in the business of medicinal mushrooms, which of course is going to blossom into a much more widespread project as I understand it. But you're like 3 years in the game here in the business end of it.
Yeah.
So what first piqued your interest to start to go into the world of fungi?
It was really looking, I guess, at the future of food as a first point of call and how we're feeding ourselves and how we're going to feed populations in the future, and understanding the GMOs and the pesticides and all of these things, and where can we go for a clean source of food, and incorporating a sustainable aspect to it in terms of deforestation, chemical use, land use, water use. How can we create something economical for the planet in terms of sustainable? And so mushrooms just ticked all the boxes from an early point of view. We sort of looked at it and saw it as an uncharted continent in terms of growing mushrooms for a food supply. For a wide range of people across different continents, across different environments, because they can grow both indoor and outdoor, but they're very adaptable to the environment. And so that was our first point of call of saying, well, hey, no one's really doing that in where we're from in WA, Perth at the time, Ryan and myself, 4.5 years ago. And then from there, really, again, it was an uncharted continent of mushrooms with just a wonderland of opportunity beyond just putting them on someone's plate, putting them into restaurants. And so that was sort of our initial idea was that. When
you guys started out, how long did it take you to monetize selling culinary mushrooms to local restaurants and whatnot? And are there any in Australia? Did you have to deal with any regulatory agencies in terms of food sanitation, origins of food, things like that to make it commercially available?
Yeah, it was growing our first mushroom was almost like having our first kid, which we haven't experienced before. But Ryan and I both don't have any children, but in terms of that piece around growing mushrooms, like you mentioned earlier, when you had some plugs and you tried to grow some mushrooms off a log, which it's not as easy as sort of putting some tomato seeds.
No, I think any kid that's like tried to grow, like when I was a kid, I used to always try to grow weed, and I would end up with male plants, or they would get stolen, or deer would eat them. It was very difficult. And I've known many people that are like, oh, I want to trip out on psychedelic mushrooms, and they try to grow those, and it's not as easy as one might think.
Very complicated. And a lot of the times very early we were growing off of coffee ground, and it's a key part of sort of that circular economy piece of this nutrient source that is farmed and shipped over for only 1% to end up in the cup and the rest to end up as ground that goes to landfill. It's a valuable nutrient resource that can be repurposed, and that's what we grow some mushrooms from as well. And so doing that was a nice idea, but very difficult from a scientific point of view early on. And so we had a key team member, Chief Scientist Thomas from France, join the team, who's a biotechnology engineer, to help us on that cultivation journey, because the science was very difficult.
That's funny about I've heard you talk about growing your mushrooms on the medium of coffee grounds, and I think that's really cool for a couple different reasons. A is because obviously that's just a wasted resource, all the energy that goes into growing coffee. And I think about that when I throw my grounds down the garbage disposal. I'm like, there's some use of this. And so years ago, I heard somewhere that they were a rich source of nitrogen, coffee grounds, and that you could put them in soil and things like that as sort of a fertilizer. And so I started like putting them in my house plants, and then all my house plants grew mold. So it's like, they must be a great medium to grow fungi, because that's exactly what happened to me, but not the spores that I wanted to. So how far did you guys go with growing mushrooms and selling them to the farmers market and restaurants and things like that?
We went. We were growing hundreds of kilos at a time.
Really?
Per week, because they go super quick. After 14 days, you've got a crop. So nothing really grows as quick as mushrooms in terms of the nutrient value that they have. And so we were doing that to restaurants all around our city. And then I guess we just sort of, again, saw that understanding of what was unfolding in terms of mushrooms, their capabilities from a medicinal point of view. The interest at the time was really around CBD, and CBD was early in the space 4.5 years ago, and understanding people want that natural ailment or that natural solution in their everyday life as a preventative measure as well. And so looking at these medicinal mushrooms, because we were at that time just growing oyster mushrooms, some lion's mane and some others from a culinary point of view, but looking at those mushrooms themselves are very powerful from a medicinal point of view, but looking at the others such as reishi, cordyceps, turkey tail.
Are lion's mane mushrooms they're also a culinary mushroom?
They are. They're known as lobster of the woods.
Oh, really?
They taste like lobster in your mouth, quite different and quite delicious.
That's funny. When I was thinking about prepping this episode and knowing that you did have some background in the culinary side of mushrooms, and I've never liked eating mushrooms. I mean, I've eaten a lot of psychedelic mushrooms, and I love medicinal mushrooms, which we're going to, of course, talk about. But culinary mushrooms that you get, that come in your pasta or on a pizza or something like that, I've just always hated the flavor and the texture. But in preparation for this interview, it just happened to be fateful that this took place. But I was at a private dinner last night at a place here called Cafe Gratitude in their Beverly Hills restaurant, and they had a kind of a opening celebration type thing, and they had the members of this kind of 60s, 70s cult called Source Family. And the members were there. So I really wanted to go for that. If anyone hasn't seen the documentary about the Source Family, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's fascinating. But so some of the OGs from the Source Family were there, and then everyone wore white. It was this really great event. And then one of the dishes was, it's all vegan food, which I typically have a hard time getting full from or digesting in many cases. But they do that type of food well. It was delicious. And so then one of the main two courses was like all mushrooms. And I just thought, maybe I just have this idea that I don't like mushrooms. And I've just held on to that idea since I was 10, because I got sick off a mushroom pizza, I think, at one point. And I used to think I was allergic to them because of that. Then I realized, no, I just don't like the taste. So last night I gave it like a completely open-minded, fair trial on some, what were probably, I don't know what variety they were, but probably some high quality, culinary mushrooms. Took a few bites and I'm like, no, I still hate mushrooms. I just can't do it. It's just weird. But so many, I don't know very many people that don't like eating
it's a
mushrooms.
hate or love relationship with those.
It is. So I'm not.
Yeah, no, you're not alone. It's
anytime
fine.
I tell someone that, they're like, "What? Mushrooms are delicious. How could you not like them?" But mushrooms, and also eggs. Like I eat egg yolks in my smoothies because I just mask the flavor, and I like the medicine that's in eggs. But eggs and mushrooms are just two foods I've never been able to get past. But anyway, enough about me. When it comes to culinary mushrooms, what are the most nutritious of those varieties? Like I have a feeling when I walk in the grocery store and see those little common button mushrooms, maybe those aren't so great, but perhaps some of the more obscure or rarefied varietals might be more nutritionally dense.
There's over 300 strains that are edible that we know of that are open to different markets. But the button mushroom or the champignon, maybe it's called over here, is the very standard mushroom that we all know of. It's almost the mushroom of economics in terms of its shelf life is stable. It's much easier to grow, but the medicinal benefits are lower. Still good benefits, but nothing compared to if you're eating lion's mane, if you're eating shiitake mushroom, if you're eating the oyster mushroom, which is sort of one of the specialty mushrooms that we were growing mostly, was the oyster mushroom, the king oyster, pink oyster, has great compounds such as ergothioneine, vitamin D, vitamin K, B vitamins. And so if you're putting mushrooms in your diet, you're on the right track, absolutely. And if you don't have a hate relationship for them, that's a bonus. But that's also, I guess, why we went down the path of the extracts as well, because a lot of people maybe don't consume them, one, as much, and don't have access to those gourmet mushrooms, and you've got to eat a lot more of them to get those compounds.
Right. So did you guys find at one point that scalability was challenging just as a business? Like, okay, there's a few of us and we were able to grow tons of these mushrooms and sell them locally, but I imagine due to shelf stability, et cetera, it's probably difficult to be shipping culinary mushrooms around.
Exactly. It was sort of both in terms of an excitement point of view, what we wanted to be investigating from a biotechnology point of view. I guess we started off as farmers in a true sense, and now we're a biotechnology company, and we made that shift very early by bringing on the science, by bringing on biotechnology engineer and other scientists in that space, microbiologists, working with nanotechnologists and working with mycologists. And so names that we never knew when we got into the business.
Right.
But going along that learning journey, understood again that those biotechnology applications was something we're very passionate about for solving real world problems. But starting with human extracts as well was something we're very passionate about, because we're able to optimize and hopefully unlock people's true potential in the sense of helping them overcome any issues they may have with their own bodies, with their own microbiome, within their own brain, within their own cardiovascular system as a step one. But beyond that, then we've got the other things that we can touch on as well. The decontamination of soils and many other applications. So yeah, there's a lot there.
When you got, we're definitely going to get into all of that. I have somewhat of a loose plan of how this is going to go, but I'm sort of becoming curious more about the process of growing mushrooms. I have a buddy in Colorado who will remain unnamed, I guess, because technically he's breaking a few laws, but he's growing psychedelic mushrooms. Penis envy mushrooms is the variety.
Okay.
Specific, they have a scientific name, but that's what everyone calls them for obvious reasons. If you saw one, you'd know why. But really potent psychedelic mushrooms, and he's doing his thing, and he showed me his operation, and it's very complex. It's sort of like, it looks like what you would keep an iguana in. There's like a fish tank, but there's temperature controlled, and you have to keep germs out. So there's air filters and all sorts of little meters for the humidity and the temperature, and it looked to be quite complex. So is this, if someone was like, hey, I want to, not for psychedelic mushrooms per se, but I want to grow a medicinal mushroom, like my failed reishi mushroom growth attempt that I alluded to earlier, and people that might want to grow some shiitake mushrooms or oyster mushrooms. Like, is it really difficult for a novice without a lot of scientific prowess to successfully grow mushrooms without them becoming contaminated or suspect to mold or whatever can go wrong?
Very good question. Yeah, it's very complicated and very simple in many ways once you understand the equation and the algorithms of humidity control, oxygen control, CO2 control, moisture content, quality of the substrate that you're using. And so all of those things are very important. And I guess going into it early, it was very difficult for us learning that process. But as we went down that path, as I said, bringing on science to the table, and once you're wanting to scale up, that's when it gets difficult. If you want to grow a couple of kilos of mushrooms, that's reasonably okay. It's not too difficult if you dedicate 20, 30, 40 hours to learning. But beyond that, if you want to scale it, then you need to, I guess, go deeply into the science and to the equipment you're using to grow those fresh mushrooms.
When you're a novice grower and things go wrong, what does that look like? Nothing happens, which is what happened to me when I tried to go reishi mushrooms. I'd go out and check every day. I'm like, nope, nothing happening. And then I just gave up and the log just sat there and maybe grew mushrooms eventually on its own from rotting in my backyard. So does just nothing happen, or does the crop sort of become contaminated or corrupt in some way where now there's, other mold or weird stuff growing that you don't want in there? Like, what happens when it doesn't work right?
Exactly. It's almost like a race. You're setting the mushroom spawn up to overtake the substrate, but it's really a fight between the fungi and the bacteria. and that's been a fight since millennia between fungi and millennia. And so those two are battle, go against each other for such a long period of time. That's why, which we can go into, is that the mushrooms are amazing against fighting bacterial infections and that's why a lot of them are antibacterial. That's why a lot of them play an important role in, antibiotic replacement, so antimicrobial resistance. And so mushrooms, when you're growing them, really the fight is between giving them the best opportunity to take over that substrate to grow mushrooms versus the bacteria winning that fight. And so what you probably saw in your case, or what people see very often, is that the bacteria wins and overtakes the fungi in the early days. And so you see trichoderma, which is this green mold on the mushrooms. And so a very key part is keeping a hygienic environment and making sure you do everything right to help the mushrooms win that battle.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess right now I'm so fascinated by this kingdom, which I always have been in the periphery, and I've been using medicinal mushrooms of all different types for a long, long time. But after seeing this recent film, which I encourage people to go out and see, I'm sure by the time this particular conversation airs, it'll be more widely available. But it pre-screened in a few cities, and you indicated that you had seen it as well. Fantastic Fungi.
Yeah.
Paul Stamets and Michael Pollan and all these great people in there. And it was not only like just an interesting subject, but I thought the film was so well done. It was brilliant. Right? I mean, it was just like the graphics and just the production value was so high, and the story that it told and the narrative that was sort of weaved throughout with all the different applications from environmental to medicinal mushrooms to the psychedelic part of it. And it was just so fascinating. And it was the perfect timing to set up this conversation, because I got like so kind of reinvigorated about it and just like, God, this kingdom of whatever is just so bizarre. And it's not a plant, it's not an animal. The fungi kingdom is its own world, and it's almost otherworldly. And when you talk about the kind of everlong battle, going back through origin of creation between bacteria and fungi, and how there's always this balance and this battle for life. It's so interesting that now we're at a point technologically where we can create environments and harness the power of these mushrooms and then start to begin to use them for all different things, which is what we're going to, of course, go into. So it's super exciting stuff. I just find these little creatures are just so weird. It's trippy. It's
going to be a very big topic over the next 10 years, really, in terms of all of those applications in the movie that was spoken about. It's a kingdom that's been sort of uncharted for a long time. So we've got a lot of problems that we need to solve quickly.
I think, and also framing it as its own kingdom is important too, from the perspective that I see mushrooms sort of categorized as like people that eat plant-based include mushrooms. And I'm like, well, it's not a plant though, it's its own thing. It's not just another vegetable or another fruit. It's kind of like the term you hear a lot, like, oh, you got to eat your fruits and vegetables as if they're the same thing, when in fact they're so different, Yeah. And I think this other kingdom is just a really fascinating thing to explore.
The mushrooms are the conduit between the paleos and the vegans and the vegetarians, because everyone can agree on them.
Right. Yeah, because it's not a plant or an animal, and it's good for everyone. When you guys started growing on coffee grounds, what was the motivation there versus using rice or some of the other sawdust, some of the other things that people use as a growing medium?
Yeah, it was really just around the city we were in. Has a lot of cafes. It has a very big cafe culture. I mean, the whole world has a pretty big coffee culture. And so we understood this was an underutilized resource, and just looking at circular economics and how do we close the loop on, waste that's not necessarily waste and has another purpose in life. And that was the coffee ground. And so that was something that we looked into, had read about mushrooms being very good recyclers, dissemblers, very good in their DNA at adapting to nutrients and what they use as nutrients. And so typically, sawdust is used, or other straw or other, pellets or rice are used, but coffee ground is another great substitute. Husks from the hemp industry can be used. So they're very intelligent. They adapt very quickly to what they can then digest, and then they can turn that into something that they can then grow and thrive and create medicinal compounds from. And so because we were at a place where coffee ground was in abundance, We trialed that and we used that, and that is one of the key elements of what we grow with.
Is there any issue with pesticide residue or toxicity in coffee grounds? If the mycelium and then the fruiting body of a mushroom is coming from just thin air, water, and coffee, and coffee beans being worldwide one of the most pesticide-laden things that we ingest, is there any possibility of contamination from those pesticides being, becoming part of the mushroom's life?
We're very specific on where we collect the coffee ground from, which is important. But then, of course, always, doing our validity testing in terms of mycotoxin testing, pesticide testing, and to see, if anything's coming through to the mushroom itself or to the mycelium, which it's not, and which is quite remarkable. So that was very important just to be able to show that.
So that's how you fix it. You just test the end result, the end product, and make sure that nothing came through, and work on sourcing to make sure you're not. I'm just imagining like shite coffee, like, the Folgers in the tin can to give the grocery store. Like, God knows where that coffee even came from.
We weren't going to Starbucks, but Starbucks doesn't really exist in Australia. So it's sort of a bit coffee snobs in Australia. And so
you are?
It's very much high quality only. According to the baristas in Australia, we are very proud of our coffee.
Are there, and this is kind of off topic, but just delving into the coffee thing, are there strict regulations in Australia in terms of testing coffee for mycotoxins and pesticides, et cetera, like there are in Europe, versus the United States, where we get pretty much the shit coffee that's left over that the other countries with more strict regulations won't allow to be imported?
Yeah, we're a lot closer to Europe in terms of the testing and the due diligence that goes into it. And it's just such a competitive market. And I think wherever there's competition, then companies want to lead. And so how do they lead? They lead by transparency and trust with their consumer and their customer. And so I guess touching on not just coffee, but other substrates and taking a tangent is, I think testing needs to occur across all foods, in terms of what's been sprayed, what hasn't been. And I think that's another area that going forward over the next 5 years, consumers are going to want for every food product. I know for myself, I will. What's been sprayed with glyphosate, what hasn't. What are we consuming on that lettuce, on those peanuts, on those almonds, on those macadamias, on those eggplants. So I think that those kind of foods all need to have that transparency.
That's a really good point. Anyone listening in the food space, economically speaking, I think that is because of podcasts like this and the proliferation of information that used to be sort of hidden, right?
Yeah.
Now we're becoming more aware of that. And you see this in the supplement industry. I'll even be vetting something that I find on Amazon. I'm like, I need a K2 supplement or this or that. So I start looking for the best of the best, which is something I enjoy doing, because then I can get the best stuff for myself and then share it with my audience and in my online store and whatnot. But now I'm seeing, it used to be very difficult. I would have to call or email a company and be like, hey, do you test for mycotoxins, heavy metals, yeast, mold, et cetera? Where's this stuff coming from?
Yeah.
And I'd have to reach out to those companies. And now I'm finding on websites of supplement brands and even on their Amazon kind of info copy, it will indicate like all of the testing for all of those things, which is interesting, which is indicative of the public demand and the public general awareness that just because something says it's a supplement or vitamin or an herb that's good for me, there could be a relatively high risk of contamination considering the origins and the sort of supply chain of where that came from. So I think you're right. As that moves into food, and imagine when you go into the bulk, like I'm thinking of the bulk bins at the health food store when I was a kid in the 70s, there'd be like granola and oats and rice and all these different nuts. It's like, those are all silo, especially grains are silo foods, and they're storable, have a long shelf life, which means they're much more susceptible to exposure to yeast, mold, etc. So
with our products in the new year, we will be bringing out pretty much a QR code, which will then be attached to the batch number and attached to the mycotoxin testing, pesticide testing, amino acids, beta glucans, all of the important compounds within the mushroom. So again, just be transparent with that. So you can click on the bottle and you can see the QR code, and then you can go straight to the lab testing for that.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
From that batch?
Yeah.
Damn, son. That's taking it to another level.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Because even with something you get off Amazon, right? I mean, you still don't know. 100%. They can say tested for this, that, and show you their lab results. But then again, are the regulatory agencies really on top of them in terms of what batch was tested. Like maybe they've had a batch tested and had clean labs come back from that, but not necessarily every batch, and certainly not to the degree of traceability that you're describing.
Yeah, and you've seen that in the CBD industry, I guess, in terms of efficacy, in terms of, a lot of people saying, oh, CBDs don't really work for me, or they do or they don't, or there's a lot of inconsistency there, and there's a lot of inconsistency in quality of product. And I think you're going to see that in mushrooms as well. As it becomes an attractive area, you're going to see hundreds of companies in that powder space as well. And so I guess you've got to ask yourself those questions around where will the mushrooms grow and how would they grow, and are there heavy metal testing? Is there pesticide testing, mycotoxin testing available to see? And then what are the actual constitutes within the mushroom in terms of beta-glucans and other things, which is very early in the science for what those compounds actually do. We have a nanotechnologist who works with us who's doing his PhD at the moment on beta-glucans, and really we're still trying to understand and identify what each one does. And so it's very early in the science, but I think just going back to those very simple questions, where were my mushrooms growing? How were they growing? What environment were they growing in? Because mushrooms are batteries, they're absorbers of their environment more than anything. And so they absorb the soil, they absorb the water, they absorb the air that they're growing in. And so, we grow our mushrooms in Byron Bay, which is, I'm not sure if you've been there, but it's almost like it's very pristine. It's almost like a Hawaii, but in an Australian sort of way. And so it's very untouched in many ways. It has an amazing environment to grow food.
And you guys, and for those of you watching on the YouTube video, if I got our new camera set up here, you can see the products I'm talking about. Because when someone comes on the show and they have a book or a product, I decided I'm going to be like our TV show and have it like sitting right here. But your extracts, that we're going to get into the different ones and all the different medicinal mushrooms and what they can do for you and stuff. You guys chose to do a liquid dual extraction process, which we'll talk about. What are, if you just randomly go on Amazon and you're like, oh, reishi mushroom is good for you, I'm just going to order some random powder or something like that. Or most of these coming from China, as I understand them. And because mushrooms are the absorbers of their environment, which is one of the great things about them, if their environment is awesome, they're taking in that information from nature. But if it's, if they're being grown outside of Beijing, under heavy pollution, is that an issue in general in the industry? And is that why you guys decided, rather than just importing bulk mushrooms and repackaging them, we're just going to have control of the entire process?
Exactly. And it was sort of, again, learning from that CBD space as well, that was unfolding at the same time, and understanding the consumer, and me being a consumer and you being a consumer, what do you want? And so it's, I guess, 95% of mushrooms at least on the market will be coming from China. And I visited China 4 years ago on a young entrepreneurship trip, and so sort of saw that environment. Amazing things that they're doing in AI and technology and these areas. But when it sort of comes to food, as an Australian, we know, you don't buy avocados or oranges or any other food product necessarily from China. It's more so the other way around, where middle-class China, who can afford it, import everything that they can from a food point of view. And so there is some question marks over that in many ways. And I guess beyond that, just being able to show transparency and just understanding that if you understand the science of mushrooms, there's so much innovation to occur there with the product. And so, we went down that path of vertically integrating our business, which means, we're doing everything from lab culture, from harvesting the mushroom strain, in different parts of Australia, or sometimes over in Canada, or sometimes in North America, having that culture and then growing it out into a mushroom, and then farming that mushroom, and then also beyond that, turning it into an extract. So we do the whole vertical chain, and that, I guess, allows us to have quality assurance of the product, and hopefully allows us also, we believe, to make the best quality product, because we're constantly innovating. We've got a team of scientists that are wanting to do good on that front, and it's been great having people like Dave Asprey, I guess, support that process, because when we first sort of sent some stuff to him, he was sort of like, had tried the powders, had them in the bulletproof cafes, nothing really noticeable for him. And as a biohacker, he's, I guess, very in tune with what he's feeling and what he's not. And so he sort of said, gave up a little bit on medicinal mushrooms. But then, first thing he really noticed was his REM sleep improve and his dreaming improve from the lion's mane that we have. And so, I guess when we first bring out these extracts, even for myself, I was like, I'm not sure if we can sell them, because it was a very noticeable difference that you were getting from them. And so, again, that quality assurance process is understanding where the mushrooms came from, how are they growing. And I think going forward, the more you can tell that story as a business, the more trust you can build within your community. And of course, you can make a higher product in terms of efficacy. And that's what people want when they're buying these products. Do they feel something or do they not?
Is there any issue with the, how do I say this, like the genetics of a strain? So would, say, a lion's mane or a reishi strain genetically be diluted if you're not getting like the spores from a source where the strain has proven to have the medicine in it to the degree that you want? I'm thinking about cannabis here, right? So there's so many different strains of cannabis and all these hybrids. And when you want to grow a cannabis plant, like it's all in that seed, right? What is in essence the seed of a medicinal mushroom, and how much of a role does that play in its ability to actually have health benefits?
Exactly. And that's really where it starts. It starts at that on that petri dish, and how you're growing that mycelium and that hyphae, the little white threads, the base of the mushroom, how that's growing out. But we have a team member who's pretty much in charge of strain management. So making sure weekly that they're healthy, making sure that they're constantly being renewed, and so they're not weakening, and so they're very potent. And so again, that sort of becomes its own sort of role and key part of the whole process. So why is that end product so good? Well, it's all the way along that supply chain. Was strain management is one task of 30 that needs to be, I guess, done to ensure that product is high quality and that you're getting those benefits.
So when it comes to agriculture, something that I think a lot of people are unaware of, and I wasn't for a long time, in the development of our agricultural system and our ability to grow plants, vegetables to eat, right? We were talking about this earlier before we recorded, just the food supply chain has become so diluted and hybridized, right? And humans have, like the dumbasses that we are, we've bred out the medicine of most of the vegetation that we eat. So that's why there's such a difference between, like, if you go to the store and get some dandelion greens, which are not really hybridized, but close to the wild dandelion greens you'd get out, just collecting in nature seasonally. If you chew on some dandelion greens, that shit is bitter. It's not really palatable. Yeah. But if you get some iceberg lettuce, it's just basically water. So that means all of the bitters and the medicines have been bred out of that. So as we've hybridized, we've actually lost a lot of the heirloom or heritage seeds that would have been unadulterated, pre 12, 15,000 years ago or whatever, right? As plants were found in the wild. And then we bred plants together to make them more manageable and more palatable. But we've systematically kind of removed the medicine from plants. Yeah. Not to mention, the soil, which is where the plants are getting the nutrients from. So I think that's really interesting when it comes to the cultivation of mushrooms, especially mushrooms whose intent is to be medicinal, like the ones right here. That must be a really important part of it, that you're making sure that it doesn't get adulterated along the supply chain, so we end up with sawdust or just colored water in an extract. Right?
Exactly. And it's a fun, being a biotechnology company, biotechnology companies can go in two directions. They can adulterate things too much. Chemical companies or pharmaceutical companies that, I guess, very focused on one compound, whereas our sort of belief is keeping it as whole body or as whole fruit and across the life cycle of the entire plant and encompassing all of that. So it's a full spectrum product, and putting it in an extract because it's bioavailable. And so it's working with technology, and then it's working with biology, and I guess trying to harmonize that relationship, and keeping things, I guess, as natural as possible is the key, because we always overstep the mark sometimes as humans and think that we know better and think that we can, outsmart with some new gadget this biological system that we have.
Welcome to my life every day on my own biology. But going back to the extraction methods and the end product of a supplement, like a medicinal mushroom product, where you guys are now doing a dual extract. So you're using water and then you're using alcohol to get that medicine out of the fungi. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So you're doing a water and a fat soluble extract, and you need that to really pull out. You can buy some reishi fruiting body chunks and you can put them in some tea and you can get some compounds, but really you're only going to get 25 to 40% of the compounds out of that mushroom. You're not going to get through the ethanol extraction. And how that's done, you can pull a varying amount of triterpenoids and other polysaccharides and beta-glucan compounds out of the mushroom. And so, yeah, you really need to have a dual extract as a baseline, and then it's really how well is it extracted. And then there's really that discussion around mycelium and fruiting body and which one's better. And I guess, as I was sort of mentioning before, really it's a matter of, we believe in working across the whole life cycle of the mushroom, because there is value in mycelium, absolutely. Just like when you're looking at a fruiting body, if you imagine that as an elderly person, there are compounds there are benefits there, but it is aged and it is on its way out. It's degrading, but it still does have some important compounds. But the mycelium is youthful, is vigorous, is very adaptive, is fighting to grow, and is expressing a lot of medicinal compounds. And so the key conversation there is, if there's mycelium involved, which there should be in a good product, how much starch is involved, and that needs to be next to nothing. And I guess through our own processes that we have patented, we're able to get it down to 0.18% starch. So next to no starch. It's just pure mycelium, which has great medicinal benefits.
There's a lot of, I'm glad you brought this up, because there's a lot of confusion, I think, in terms of, fix your ear, Cookie. This weird thing. My dog looks so cute when her little ears are down, but for some reason when she flips them over and then the pink part shows, cuteness goes down by 50%. Thankfully, she can understand English. I'm sorry, Cookie. She's now our permanent co-host. Pretty much every show I do, she comes and sits with the guests. It's quite sweet.
Yeah, she's very peaceful.
Yeah, I think it's like she's my little oxytocin booster. But anyway, I digress. Going back to the mycelium versus fruiting body, I think there's a lot of consumer confusion and also debate amongst the manufacturers of mushroom products as to whose is the best. There's this, rivalry kind of going on. And in that recent film, Fantastic Fungi, Paul Stamets, who's arguably one of the world's foremost experts on all things mushrooms of all types, makes a really strong point and indicates there's now a lot of research being done that would support the idea that the mycelium is really where the medicine is concentrated, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
And then he has a company called Host Defense that makes medicinal mushroom products and capsules and whatnot. And there have been other companies like that too. And I don't want to be disparaging toward his stuff because I haven't opened up his bottles in a long time. But it's one of the ones I've tried, and there seem to be a lot of products that do have a lot of that starch in them. And I think I've been confused about, well, is that starch like the growing medium that just ends up in a capsule? Because when I open it up, it doesn't have a smell. It doesn't really have a taste. Yeah. Am I just eating a bunch of sawdust or rice fiber? Or am I getting the medicine in the mycelium? So I find this to be very confusing. Yeah. I guess you guys are like, it doesn't matter. We're just going to extract it all out, and you're going to get the medicinal components or constituents rather that are in the mycelium and the fruiting body. You're going to put them in a liquid extract, and then you don't have to worry about any of that. Yeah. But do you think, I don't want you to point fingers and put other people down because you're a very high vibe guy. You're not going to be like, our product's the best, don't buy other shit. But are there a lot of mushroom products just frankly on the market that suck and are just basically like rice powder and a bunch of sawdust that don't have any of the medicinal constituents left in them?
You've got some of that, and you definitely have a lot of products that are imported from China that are repackaged and labeled, and then you don't have a supply chain transparency or traceability growing in China, where that 45% of farmable land is now not farmable because of the way that they've sort of polluted their own environment. And so you've got both issues arising in terms of the quality of the product. Is there starch in this product, from a locally grown product, or is it an imported product and you don't know really the efficacy behind it and the potency behind it, and it's in a powder form as well, which isn't as bioavailable. And so you've got sort of both things happening, and I'm pretty sure in the CBD space you've got those same debates happening across different things, and there's always economic bias as to why people are saying what they're saying, and that occurs, because maybe they're getting their mushrooms from China, so they're going to support the China story, or maybe they're growing them here and they want to support that story. And so I guess you have to ask those questions around, where was it grown, how was it grown, and just first of all, try the product for yourself. Did you notice anything? And I guess with us, and what you were saying before, typically maybe you're feeling a grainy taste to it. So with our extracts, you're getting more light sweetness, because mycelium is actually quite sweet. If you eat pure mycelium, it's actually quite palatable. It's quite nice. You can eat it. It's got a sweet taste to it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, with the powder extracts, do I have this right? Because there's a couple companies that I really like the powdered extract, like, of course, Four Sigmatic. Anyone that listens to this show, you hear me talk about all the time. I use them constantly. They're also more palatable. It's like, I don't think if someone had cancer, I wouldn't be like, hey, have one little packet of Four Sigmatic every morning. It'd be like, you need to like mega dose on reishi, like drink a whole bottle of this and, 5 tablespoons of that extract. So, it depends on what your kind of purpose is and where your health is. There's another company, I love their reishi extract called Longevity Power. Yeah. And they make this it looks like powdered coffee. It's like dark, almost black, really potent powdered extract of reishi. It's quite bitter. It's totally unpalatable. It would never take the place in a mega dose of something like a Four Sigmatic, which is, has all these other herbs and it's quite palatable and mixes well in coffee and whatnot. So I use a number of different powdered extracts, also real mushrooms. I interviewed a guy named Jeff Chilton, who's an old buddy of Paul Stamets, like an OG mushroom importer. Their mushrooms come from China, but up in the mountains where it's not polluted. So I kind of asked him about that issue too, as far as I understand, the other two aforementioned brands. So there are some good powders out there. I think the issues with those at times is that they're not that palatable. Like if I take the reishi powder that I just described and put that in your coffee, you'd be like, ew, this is too bitter. Yeah. I don't care though. Not in a small dose, but in a mega dose. I don't care because I just want the medicine. To me, like everything that I ingest for the most part is for its effect, not because I want it to be palatable. If I want palatable, I go out to a farm to table restaurant and have a nice meal, right? Yeah. That's not why I'm making a smoothie. I want the juice, man. Yeah. So when it comes to two things, I'm trying to make this into a question and not a rant, but two things is when it comes to sourcing from China, I'm assuming it depends on where they're coming from, right? I mean, it's a massive country and there are areas in which there are mushrooms being grown, for medicinal purposes where it is pristine and not polluted. Yeah. Right? I mean,
there are places, I guess, forests and things in China where you can do this. And I think, I don't want to single out China as a thing. I think as a sustainable method going forward, what's the carbon footprint of our food? And understanding that, we should be eating locally sourced food for many reasons. For example, honey should be eaten from its local environment because then that way you're getting the antiviral and the antibacterial and the flowers and the immune benefits from your local flora and fauna. And so there's benefits to that as well from an energetics point of view and from an antiviral and antibacterial point of view. So I guess from our point of view as a company, we just believe in locally grown product and being as transparent as possible. And if you can do that, that's a good start, and educating the market on those key points as to how to, I guess, identify a good quality product. And again, like you said, where you're up to. Powders can be a great entry-level piece, because it's sort of, I'm very new to mushrooms and I want to try some extracts and liquid extracts. So, we find we have, elite athletes and professional surfers and different forms of people using these products from a performance point of view, Dave, because they want that. They want to feel it immediately or quickly to know that that's working for them. So I think it is a balance between, we've been stuck in that model of if it tastes bad, it must be good for us. I don't think is always the case.
That's been something I've struggled with a lot because then, like, for example, I just got 2 giant jugs of my Surthrival colostrum. And that's a health product that tastes freaking delicious and it's also really good for you. So if you just tasted that, you'd think, wow, this kind of tastes like vanilla, milky, buttery, delicious, kind of like a powdered creamer, I guess you could say. You could mix it into a smoothie or elixir or something like that. So something like that, you'd never imagine that it has all these immunomodulating benefits and steroidal benefits and all of these great medicines in it. It just tastes like a milk powder, you know? And then there are other things that have horrific taste. I remember years ago, I used to get these fresh juices of bitter melon, which will almost make you pass out. No one makes it anymore because it's like no one can handle it. But that's on the opposite spectrum where no one except the most psycho person like me is ever going to drink bitter melon extract raw, like fresh juice. It's just, it literally almost makes you fall down. It tastes so strong and so bad, but there's so much medicine in it. So I think it is, a balance of kind of really getting to know the different companies that you're buying your products from and doing a bit of research and understanding like where they're sourcing. And as you keep mentioning that word transparency of like, does it say on the bottle where it comes from and the origins of the supply chain and its impact on the local economy where it's from and the people that are producing it and the employees and everything that goes into it, I think is really, really important. And it's exciting that that's becoming more widespread. And a brand like yours is going to build value on the relationship of transparency to the customer, where you can go like, here, want pictures of our lab? It's right here. Yeah. But what I was alluding to before, the second part of my question was, leaving apart we've got a good origin source. We know it's clean. It wasn't from a crappy place in China, et cetera. And we were hoping that the strains are valid and all of that. But when it comes to the absorption, this is what I'm curious about. If I'm doing a powdered extract, is that powdered extract made from like doing the water and the alcohol extract, making it into a liquid, and then spray drying it into some sort of powder medium? Like, what do they use? Like maltodextrin or something like that to make it into a powder again, and then you're doing that extract? Would it not be more beneficial? And maybe the answer is yes, which is why you guys are doing it, to just keep it as a liquid rather than trying to reconstitute it as a powder. It's always that balance between, I guess, trying to make it as convenient for the customer. And so that's why taste is very important, like we've been speaking about, but also to not add or not interfere with that process as much as possible and keep it in its natural form as much as possible. And that includes the compounds as well. And so when you transition them from a liquid to a powder, subjectively, we know that, it's definitely decreasing the potency. And on a scientific level, the bioavailability is decreasing as well. Right. Just like when you grab a tomato, and if you pick that tomato and it's in your backyard, it tastes a lot better than if you get something from the shops, because energetically and bioavailable wise, it's so much fresher. And so this is, the piece with extracts is that bioavailability and also how it's absorbed. It's not going necessarily through your stomach. It's going sublingually straight under your tongue. It's a very common way that people take it. So you're absorbing it quicker. So absorption modalities are very important. Oral sprays, liquid extracts versus powders, they all have different absorption rates. Yes. Okay, that's where I wanted to go, because even if you have a high quality powdered extract, if you're eating it, then it's got to go through the whole digestive process. And what you really want is for the medicine in that thing you're taking to be in your blood. Like, that's where we're trying to get it, right? As quickly as possible. So if you've got a potent extract and you're doing it sublingually under your tongue, then the capillaries in the mucous membrane in your mouth are actually going to uptake that directly without the interference of having to go through your different organ systems in the digestive tract and be subject to the rather hostile environment in terms of the pH and the acidity in your stomach too, which things like probiotics oftentimes don't survive through. Exactly. And it's also keeping it alive as much as possible in its active form, which in a liquid, in its ethanol water extract solution, it is more alive. Is there assistance of the alcohol not just as a preservative but as a carrier? Is there not like some vasodilation happening when you do a sublingual tincture that has alcohol in it? Is there better absorption because of that as well versus just something that has glycerin in it or something? Exactly. That's sort of a question we sort of get is, do you do a glycerin version, which glycerin still get good uptake, but that vasodilation you get with the ethanol compounded with the fact that you're getting those triterpenoids and the other compounds from that extraction process just make for a faster absorbing, more noticeable product. I definitely have noticed two things with your guys' stuff is the lion's mane, and we'll talk about the different ways that you can stack lion's mane, but I'll do pretty mega doses of that to test out two things, just cognition, focus, mental acuity in general, and then also improving REM sleep, both of which have been dramatically improved from doing like a few droppers under the tongue and I hold it there forever and just let it all soak in. And then also using the Cordyceps before working out. And I need all the help I can get when I work out. It's not something I particularly enjoy doing, but I have built it into a fairly regular practice. And I find that I'm definitely more, I'm just stronger. Like I have a little more endurance when I do the Cordyceps, which is, I know, one that's really popular with athletes. So let's break down kind of the different most common medicinal mushrooms that people use and what they use them for. And I guess we could start with kind of in the Chinese medicine world, reishi being, the Mac Daddy of them all.
The Mac Daddy, the mushroom of immortality, exactly. So that's, when I was over in China, it's on all the temples. It's in a lot of artwork over there. It's very revered for a long time. It was seen as a gift very early on in terms of something that you would give a family member to keep away bad spirits. And that was sort of the Eastern philosophy of it. But then it moved into consuming it in a tea and in extracts. And really what we know is it's an immunomodulator. It's non-specific. And so when people say, what does this mushroom do? Does it work on this or this or this? They're so vast and so broad spectrum, and what they can do is they're very smart in, I guess, identifying and at their core, upgrading the immune software. And that immune software of your natural killer cells, your macrophages, your phagocytes, can then, with an upgraded software system, very quickly and early identify any issues within your system and wherever those issues may be. And so the reishi is a subjectively very calming mushroom. It's very good to take if you're overwhelmed and overstressed, which, maybe LA traffic, maybe everyday life, being a parent, being an entrepreneur, being a podcaster, biker, we all deal with stress on a daily basis. And so from a stress point of view, calming that nervous system down, supporting that immune system as well, to fight any sort of niggles that we may have internally and identify those quickly before they, cannibalize into something much more serious or sinister. Reishi is an amazing mushroom for that.
And also, based on my subjective experience, quite difficult to grow on your own.
Not to mention the extraction process. So, still on stage one with you, but that's...
Yeah, I used to go back this is going back 20 years, man. I used to go to Chinatown here in LA, and they're really fascinating. I always loved going in those herb shops in Chinatown. In San Francisco, even when I was a kid, we used to go there, but they have these giant, it looks like kind of like a medical lab almost, these giant bottles with huge ginseng roots that are suspended in some liquid formaldehyde kind of, looking thing, like a brain in formaldehyde sort of. And then they have these massive jars and just the overwhelming smell of all these herbs and things like that. And so I used to buy these sliced reishi mushrooms. They kind of look like brown bacon. And then I remember trying to eat them. Like, you can't eat them. They're like wood, a lot of like very firm cellulose. And so then I would decoct them in a what do you call it? What's the word? Decoct. Decoct is when you get your penis removed. I would boil them and then make this tea, and reishi tea made like that tastes like shit. I mean, it's really, really gross. Unlike chaga tea, which is amazing. But reishi is one of those ones that is just ubiquitous in the herbal system of Chinese medicine. I mean, it is probably the one you're going to find most commonly. And then when I finally figured out the extracts, I do find that one to be really calming and relaxing. It's not one that you would get energy from. It's one that's just sort of like turns down your nervous system.
Exactly. So typically, maybe more an evening thing or an afternoon thing. But of course, if you wake up overwhelmed or you've got something stressful on and you need to feel calm and centered, then that can be a good one. It's sort of turning down the volume, whereas Cordyceps is turning up the volume. So they're going in different directions.
Got it. Okay. And then what about, let's talk about Cordyceps.
Cordyceps, I think with Cordyceps, we've saved a lot of marriages. Testimonially, anecdotally, in terms of just that stamina that you get, that vitality that you get with the Cordyceps mushroom, known as the Tibetan Viagra.
Oh, are you serious? I didn't know about this part. I've been wasting it on working out. Jesus,
you're definitely getting that level of energy that you may require stamina, vitality, and it can be a good substitute for caffeine or coffee, or if you really sort of want to take off, add it to your coffee. But it's a great piece where you're not getting that peak and trough of energy flow, more a 4 to 6 hour buzz or flow without sort of that adrenal fatigue attached to it, which we can sometimes be succumbed to with coffee because we can have another coffee after lunch or it's too late in the day, and then that interrupts with our sleep. And so it's really, I guess, with that, the adaptogen, of the Cordyceps is that it can turn down the volume itself if your environment is turned down. So they're very smart in that sense that, if you have good health hygiene and bed hygiene and sleep hygiene, that the cordyceps won't keep you up at night, which is very smart and a great thing. But the most important aspect is that it increases ATP production, so adenine triphosphate, helps stimulate mitochondrial regeneration, and it is amazing at cellular repair as well. So from an anti-aging strategy, it helps, penetrate the DNA or RNA of an infecting virus or infecting bacteria and stops it from replicating.
And what about the different strains of cordyceps? I know there's been a lot of buzz about the ones that work and don't work. And as it was made popular, I guess, in the Chinese medicine system, or maybe even in Tibet, was the cordyceps that grow on the back of a worm or something like that. And they're very revered and quite expensive if you want to get that strain of an extract, because they have to be hand collected by monks and up to 20,000 feet up in the Himalayas and whatnot. But what's kind of the background on cordyceps in terms of that strain and the other ones now that are available? And are some of the strains relatively useless, as I understand
it? Sinensis and Militaris are the two sort of main ones, but it's fascinating. We're finding new strains of cordyceps every couple of weeks. It's finding approximately 700 new different strains of mushroom a year that have been unidentified, and so we're really only on the iceberg of the fungi kingdom, as we mentioned before. And so with cordyceps, there's Sinensis and Militaris are the two well-known mushrooms that are in the mainstream as a product. Both are reasonably good and fairly similar in what they do in terms of increased ATP, increased oxygen uptake, increased stamina, increased vitality. Again, it also goes back to the extraction process and the modality in which you're consuming it and how it was growing. So both are good to take, but the cordyceps as a base is always growing in its natural environment by, impregnating itself into a host, making it attractive enough to consume by a host, and then overtaking the host's body over time to then, release its spores, popping out of its head or out of its body. And so it's not very vegan friendly in many ways, the cordyceps, when it's grown in its wild environment. When we grow it, and many other farms grow it in their sort of, commercial environment, then we're growing it off of rice or other substrates.
Can you grow that one off coffee too?
We haven't done that one off coffee. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. So the ones that aren't coming off the head of a dead worm are still good for you.
They're still good for you.
Okay.
Yeah. I was in Pennsylvania recently with one of the guys from Fantastic Fungi, William, and we went cordyceps foraging, and we were out there for 4 hours, and we found one little pinprick in a spot that he sort of knew that has many cordyceps. So wild harvesting, you can understand the value because it's like finding a needle in a haystack. You could have walked over it in 2 seconds, but we dug it out, and it was attached to a host, to a caterpillar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you did find one of those.
Yeah,
damn. Yeah, I've heard that if you want those, I forget what it's like $10,000 a kilo or something crazy. Like if you are able to source,
scarcity has value.
Yeah. Then what about one of my favorites and one that I've been using as a tea? I go on Amazon and I buy chunks of it, and that's chaga, because I don't live in an area where there's birch trees that I can go collect my own. But I love just making a big crock pot of chaga. I'll just buy 5 pounds of it off eBay, and it lasts me a couple years. I put a handful of chunks in a crock pot with some spring water, boil it for like 2 days, kind of like making a bone broth, and then I'll use that really kind of dense tea as a base for coffee and different elixirs, and just keep it in the refrigerator. It lasts forever too, and it's one of the mushrooms that actually tastes really good as a water extract.
Yeah,
but I also realize I'm missing the fat soluble qualities of it because I'm not then doing an alcohol extract. And I've known some friends that will get the water soluble parts of it out, boiling it, then they'll take those chunks and put it in alcohol, and after some time they get the rest of it out. Or you can just take a product like yours and it's all done for you. But I love the taste of chaga, and I love combining it with other things. And also in Chinese medicine, it's always the one maybe like second to reishi that's so highly revered. And not only in Chinese medicine, but in Russia too, where it's very prevalent and used for anti-cancer protocols and all this. So give me the breakdown on
Yeah.
chaga that I'm such a huge fan of.
Well, I guess when you were having that chaga tea, what did you notice from, a subjective point of view yourself?
Well, one thing that's great about making the chaga tea is if you use it as a coffee base, it makes your coffee very alkaline and not acidic. So if you're someone that sort of struggles with, having heartburn and things like that from having acidic drinks or foods, that's one thing for sure. So it's just kind of a taste thing, and also just knowing the properties that support your immune system, and also the melanin content and the vitamin D2. So taking large doses of chaga is like an internal sunscreen, sort of like astaxanthin.
Yeah.
And I'm not really prone to getting sunburn anyway, but I think between taking astaxanthin and a lot of chaga tea, I can pretty much go out in the sun as long as I want. I don't get burned.
Yeah.
Unless I'm like on the beach in Rio near the equator, which I learned the hard way. Because I was like, I don't get sunburn, bro. Well, yeah, if you're really close to the equator at a certain time of year.
Come to Australia, it'll test you as well. The UV is pretty high in Australia.
But so it was more of that. Like, wow, I wonder if this is true. Let me test it. I'm like, holy shit, I'm very resilient to sun when I'm doing a lot of chaga tea.
Yeah. What we notice and what we get a lot of testimonials from is your eyes just really light up and become bright. It's almost like a veil has been lifted off of your eyes, and you look in the mirror, you're sort of like, what's just happened? That's you get that 3-4 days after having chaga extract. It's one of those ones that you see those noticeable differences really quickly in terms of glow of skin and the piercing of your eyes and the veil being lifted off of them, which is quite phenomenal. But from a medicinal point of view, you've got the botulin, like you said, you've got the melanin, so it's sort of an internal restoration of the pineal gland as well, because we know that the melanin is very important for the pineal gland and detoxifying the pineal gland. Melatonin is very important for that. And so there's definitely an aspect there in terms of that. And that's sort of also what you're getting with the lion's mane, which we'll touch on in a minute, is attached to that pineal gland and that activation and how we can detoxify that through the use of lion's mane and through the use of other mushrooms. But with the chaga mushroom, it's, a full spectrum of antioxidants, one of the highest, most antioxidant properties foods out there in the world. Again, and going back to the story of it, well, it's growing in negative 30 to 40 degree temperatures, Celsius, that is. It's growing on birch trees, which is an amazing tree by itself. Birch bark, birch sap, xylitol comes from birch. It's an amazing tree which has amazing medicinal compounds on its own. And so you pair that with the mushroom, chaga, you pair it with a tough climate, and you pair it with a long period of time of which it grows, then it makes sense as to why it's so powerful. I guess the main question there is really around the sustainable sourcing and harvesting of this mushroom, because again, it only grows 2 birch trees in every 10,000 will have chaga attached to it or will grow chaga. So it's extremely rare.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and so I guess that's why we're a bit late coming to the party of the chaga party in terms of finding those very sustainable partners and foragers that we can trust, because I'm sure this mushroom is going to become very popular, as it already is, but it's where did we source it from, and is it sustainable, or are we going to over-harvest it in 5 years' time and there's no chaga around? And of course, attached to climate change, heating up of different temperatures makes it hard because we're losing a lot of birch forest.
And I've heard something about the need to, if you're going to harvest chaga, leaving aside just environmental impact and the scarcity of the birch trees that have these fungal growths on them, which if you're listening, if you can imagine, kind of like a birch tree has a white sort of bark surface, kind of powder coated looking almost, right? And then when there's a chaga on it, it looks like a big wart or like a cancerous tumor, basically, right? But that some say that if you harvest a chaga wart, for lack of a better term, off of a birch tree, if it's not been there 20 years or something, that it's not that good. Like the longer they're growing on a tree, the more time they have to bioaccumulate the nutrients that we're wanting to get in our body by extracting it. Do you know anything about how, like the age of a chaga?
Absolutely. We've been thinking about that ourselves in terms of, you've got aged barrel whiskey, you'd have aged barrel chaga. That's 10 years plus, 15 years plus, 20 years plus. Absolutely will have more compounds and more medicinal benefits than a younger chaga.
And so with you guys wanting to source things locally, and now as we sit here right now, your chaga product isn't available. You've got the other ones that we're have been talking about and will continue to. But is that like the one thing you guys are like, well, we don't have birch trees in Australia, so we're going to have to get this from Russia or North Dakota or wherever the hell they come from?
Yeah, we have a source in Canada, a source in the US, and a forager in Lithuania. They're sort of our three foragers that we work closely with. So we try to work direct with these foragers and understand that whole story behind that sustainable harvesting. But we do have a facility being, I guess, established at the moment in America, in Wisconsin. And so that's where we're doing all of our production going forward. And that's where the chaga gets processed. Australia, much too dry for birch trees.
Yeah. And with the chaga, obviously, like all the mushrooms, it's important that you do the dual extract because, like, when I just make the tea, I'm missing out on a certain percentage of the medicinal value.
It's better than doing nothing, of course.
Right.
But absolutely, if you really want to go full power into fifth gear, and again, like you'll see that piercing of your eyes, you'll see that glow of your skin within 3-4 days, and you'll just feel amazing with the chaga mushroom.
And then what about Shiitake mushrooms, which you guys have as a medicinal extract? And I've always thought of Shiitake mushrooms as just being a culinary mushroom and was unaware that they had value in terms of, in kind of the herbal medicine system.
Very underrated mushroom, the Shiitake mushroom. It's not as sexy as the lion's mane or the Cordyceps or the reishi, but definitely a daily staple. Almost see it as a multivitamin in terms of your mushroom stack, in terms of the lentinan as a compound, in terms of the ability to help produce and reduce the elastase. So elastase is what you get from UV damage. There's obviously collagen is a big word at the moment, and collagen products are very popular. The other one when it comes to skin health is the elasticity of your skin and the elastin within the skin, which gets broken down by aging, gets broken down by photoaging as well. And so it minimizes the elastase process. And this is really what causes the loss of elasticity in your skin. And so a huge part of photoaging. So, UV radiation protection, Shiitake is amazing. Preventing photoaging, it's amazing. And for cardiovascular health, it's also amazing. And of course, like a lot of other mushrooms, has the antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antiviral properties to it. So it's not as sexy as the other ones. People are very familiar with it because they see it in a dish. But if you can stack that in high concentration, it's great as an anti-aging protocol.
That's interesting thinking about. I didn't know the relevance in terms of skin elasticity and all of that. That's a really powerful in terms of like aesthetic beauty. That's a really powerful combination then with the chaga. Because you're getting, interesting.
And it's got the vitamin D2, D3, and D4. So
it does as well?
Full spectrum vitamin D.
That's crazy, dude. All right.
It's very underrated.
I'm going to get on that because if you look at my bottles of the Life Cykel mushrooms, you'll see that the one that has the most in it is always the Shiitake, because I'm like, I don't really know what it does. So I'm not like the other, like the lion's mane especially and the Cordyceps I go through in like freaking 3 days.
The other one with Shiitake, just to add on that, is hair, skin, and nails. In terms of the strength of your nails, you'll notice very quickly in terms of how stronger and how faster they will grow.
Oh, weird.
Nails, and so you're sort of going into Wolverine mode pretty quickly.
Really? So it must have something to do with collagen synthesis or something, huh?
Yeah, well, they're not so much combining or containing amino acids as much as the other mushrooms. They're containing amino with an I, so IMON, amino acids, which are a second metabolite to amino acids or a secondary type of amino acid. And so this is where really you're seeing the magic of those proteins that are responsible for hair, skin, and nails.
Oh, trip out. Wow, God. Just when I think I know some shit, I sit down with someone like you and I get my mind blown again. I learn more. It's so fascinating. All right, then what about, what one didn't we cover? Oh, the turkey tail.
Another very underrated mushroom. And I think it's really, it's found very commonly in the forest. If you go to the forest and you know what you're looking for, you'll find some turkey tail mushroom, and there's different strains and varieties. We source our turkey tail mushroom from the Blue Mountains in Australia, which is a sort of a pristine area again, just a utopian forest and amazing mountains there. But this mushroom on the research shows PSK and PSP, two compounds, polysaccharide quercetin, polysaccharide peptide, both amazing compounds. PSP has been shown to improve gut health through being a prebiotic. There was a study done out of Harvard University a couple of years ago to show that it activates macrophages, activates immune cells, activates good gut bacteria. And so we know that gut-brain axis really to do with mental health, to do with your levels of anxiety and your general mood every day is really regulated more by your gut than it is by your brain. And so that's very important. So turkey tail as a prebiotic is very strong, very potent. What we've seen in with the PSK, which is the other compound in Japan now, it's just been approved and is used in conjunction with cancer treatment a lot now. So this compound is PSK, polysaccharide quercetin, has great sort of properties to help stimulate the immune system post-chemotherapy. And so there's been a study also done in North America that was a rather large study, $2 million study on breast cancer, and it showed when having turkey tail in conjunction with chemo that the patient fared better in terms of their ability to bounce back from and their immune system to respond and reactivate after the chemo. So that was exciting. It's new, early and novel research, but it's definitely on the right track. The other thing, I guess, from our team, of 10 lab staff, our favorite is really the turkey tail mushroom because it's just that mood stabilizer, makes you feel really good. And if you have any digestive issues, Crohn's, allergies, allergens, any digestive feeling, that's really where we've seen great results.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. Again, that would probably be the bottle that stays the second most full like out of all of them. But digestive issues have been historically something that I've been working on quite a bit. I don't know that I've cracked the code there, but with the prebiotic effect, is the prebiotic still valid in an extract when there's not the actual, like when I think of prebiotic, it's like taking, cornstarch or acacia, whatever powder, like that type of shit that is just non-soluble fiber, right? That your gut bacteria likes to eat to feed them, being prebiotic, as I understand it. Is that effect still present when you have a liquid extract?
Well, that's what the research showed with the Harvard study in terms of the turkey tail mushroom, that PSP compound, as long as that's present, gives the stimulatory effect to that good gut bacteria.
Oh, cool.
Because we do know also, I guess, you've got those debates around, are these needing to be refrigerated? Are they not being refrigerated, prebiotics and probiotics, and how are they sort of being absorbed? And are they getting absorbed by they get to the gut? I guess going back to that conversation, the turkey tail is tackling gut issues, so it's going to the gut, whereas when we're taking these extracts, they're going sublingually. A lot of the time are being absorbed and bypassing the stomach.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay. Wow. Cool. And then what about, what one haven't we covered? Lion's mane.
The favorite one is definitely a favorite one. And because I think also, you're getting very immediate benefits and noticeable benefits. And one of the things that first came to us, again, that wasn't really in the literature. And again, this is sort of why we go back to the belief on, the mycelium having a lot of potency in it, if extracted well, if grown well, if, you're removing all the grains from the process. We're getting a lot of people reporting back on that dreaming and that REM sleep, which is not in the literature really anywhere around the lion's mane mushroom and its benefits to do that. And so it's a great stack, the lion's mane and the turkey tail, because you're combating REM sleep with gut health. So you're getting that gut-brain access and you're optimizing that. But for the lion's mane, we know it's really a remyelinator of nerve cells, a regenerator. It's helping with neurogenesis. It's slowing down and decreasing neuroinflammation, which is something we're all suffering from an early age as we sort of get older. But if you're, in a neurological condition, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, these kind of neurological conditions, can lion's mane help prevent that in some way? That's going to be very interesting research to see come out. But from a subjective point of view, this mushroom is very popular for optimizing brain health and just feeling better, just having the veil lifted off of you, having that focus, that clarity, that ability to consolidate memory overnight through the REM sleep. So then the next day, if you're studying, you're able to consolidate the work you've been doing. So it's another sort of funny one where it has dual use. Dual use in the fact that you can take it in the morning and you can have that uplift in focus, memory and mental clarity. You can take it in the evening and get that increased REM sleep. And so, it's a sort of dual purpose mushroom. And I guess from our point of view, taking 1 or 2 mil in the morning and 1 or 2 mil at night seems to get amazing results, and the testimonials have been amazing. And we just sort of realized the other day that we were in Dave's book Superhumans for Life Cykel Lion's Mane, and him putting it as an essential hack for sleeping and improving REM sleep. So again, we're just sort of, I guess, this team of scientists have done an amazing job. Tom, our chief scientist there, has done an amazing job at just trying to produce something that's high quality.
We'll be right back at you after this brief but important announcement. This episode is brought to you by Four Sigmatic. I love this company, and what I love most about them is their instant coffee, because 64% of us Americans drink coffee daily, but 100% of us should be drinking the Four Sigmatic mushroom coffee, because it's more than just coffee. It's got lion's mane, which you may know is really good for your brain. It's my favorite medicinal mushroom. It helps with focus, productivity, and creativity. In fact, Buddhist monks for a very long time have been using lion's mane to help their focus during meditation. It also includes chaga, the king of mushrooms. But what is really cool about it is it's 100% organic. It's got no sugar, no carbs, no calories. It's vegan, paleo, sugar-free, dairy-free, although mine's not dairy-free because I put butter or ghee in it. But the rad thing about it is that it has about half the caffeine of regular coffee, which is, fine because you can just put 2 packets of it in your coffee if you want to go all out. But the mushroom coffee is way easier on my gut. It doesn't have that jittery crash thing going on, probably because it doesn't have any mold. It's really high quality coffee. But the very best thing about this is that they are easy to use packets you can take anywhere. So I put them in my suitcase, in my backpack every time I travel, literally every single time. I've got the Four Sigmatic little, travel packets of coffee with me. It dissolves very easily in cold or hot water. So I'll use this on the airplane. I take it on road trips. Anytime I need a little boost of brain power or energy, I use the Four Sigmatic mushroom coffee. It's freaking amazing. I'm not even joking. I have a special offer for you, of course, as a coveted audience member. You can get 15% off your Four Sigmatic order. Go to foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. Enter the code Luke Story at checkout. That's LUKESTOREY. And the website again is foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. Spelled out, that's FOURSIGMATIC. foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. Save 15% off. Try this coffee out. You're going to freaking love it, guaranteed. And now, back to the interview. With the lion's mane, this is, I think, the one I'm most interested in right now for a couple of different reasons. One is improving sleep, because that's just, that's one of my main goals in my whole life. And sometimes my sleep's great, sometimes not. The past week, like I was telling you, I'm like, what did I do? I don't know. Everything's fine. I'm not, there's no known disturbances or major changes in my life or diet or anything, and my sleep has just been shit. So I use the Aura Ring to quantify what works, what doesn't. I'm always trying to fine tune the sleep. And it's interesting because when I've done a big dose of your lion's mane on its own and not done any other funny business with other sleep, herbs and things like that, then my REM sleep score goes up.
Yeah.
But if I do the lion's mane and I do CBD, I'll do my own CBD, then my REM sleep doesn't improve. It's weird. It's, for me, in my brain, CBD cancels out the benefits of the REM inducing lion's mane, as far as I can tell based on my score. There's other factors of I looked at my phone too late, or went out to dinner and saw headlights driving home. I mean, there's so many things you don't really know for sure. You'd have to really do A/B testing for a couple months to really fine tune that. But if I do nothing else and I'm following all my other sleep hygiene, absolutely I'll get longer REM sleep.
Yeah.
Hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, which is more than I would normally get.
Yeah.
Another thing I've noticed, just for people listening, is I used to do, I'm out right now, so I'm not been, but my buddy Brian, who's been on the show, has a company called Medicine Box, and they make cannabis oil that has THC that you would get from a dispensary, that kind of thing. But he's really, really high quality, super beyond organic, and he infuses other herbs into it and makes these really nice tinctures. So I don't take that recreationally, but I was messing with that with sleep, and I would get way better deep sleep, but crappy REM sleep. So it's interesting. Like the cannabis and the CBD stuff is really tricky with sleep. It's very delicate, at least in my brain. So I'm curious about doing more self-testing, like no funny business with any other stuff, and just like tracking my REM sleep from doing the lion's mane. Another thing I've done, which has been working pretty well, is there's this peptide called DSIP, sleep-inducing I forget the acronym. Anyway, DSIP. Yeah. And it's a peptide you inject subcutaneously for deep sleep. And you do it a couple hours before you go to sleep. And my sleep will go from, maybe an hour to an hour and a half, or even 2 to 2.5 hours. So it's a marked improvement. What's interesting about that is that if I do the lion's mane and that peptide, then I get really high scores of both. So it doesn't have the interference that like a CBD product does. So interesting stuff, and I'm sure it's different for every single brain on the planet because we all have unique biochemistry, but I'm always trying to find the supplements that I can use that bring both of those scores continually higher and then just like stick with what's working.
Absolutely. That synergistic benefit, and that's sort of a good segue into all of these extracts having Kakadu plum in it, which is a sort of a native indigenous bush food in Australia, quite rare, which grows up in Arnhem Land, and sort of similar to chaga in terms of it growing in a very tough climate over a period of time. These trees that establish themselves in very remote desert-like parts of Arnhem Land in northern Australia, but this is the highest understood fruit with Kakadu plum in terms of vitamin C in the world, and so that potency of that vitamin C, and again taking it in its whole body form, not in its supplement form, and finding getting it in an isolate vitamin C powder is very different to finding it in a full spectrum fruit and extracting it that way. And so we find that was sort of when we were sort of doing our R&D and understanding what synergistic benefits we could find to go with these mushrooms and complement them. The vitamin C definitely helps amplify the aspect of the mushroom, and high dosing vitamin C is very important as well as a strategic tool.
With that, what's it called? Kakadu?
Kakadu plum.
Kakadu plum?
Kakadu plum.
Weren't you telling me that the comparison of the amount of vitamin C it has compared to an orange or camu, isn't it like ridiculously high in vitamin C? It's ridiculous.
It's sort of around 90 to 100 times an orange in terms of a serve.
Holy shit.
And so it's, again, just when you can put that in an extract form, this is the beauty of, again, like going back to, when you had fresh mushrooms that you were growing in a town and a city, then you weren't able to scale those, but now we're able to, share that Kakadu plum with Australia, with other countries in terms of getting, a small serving size, but getting a huge impact from that. So it makes it super easy and simple. But yeah, the Kakadu plum is a fascinating mushroom.
Yeah, I've never heard of it prior to you guys.
Yeah.
I wonder if that has anything to do with the shiitake skin benefits, because vitamin C is a catalyst for collagen synthesis, which makes your skin, hair, nails, etc. I wonder if there's any correlation there.
I think there is, because we've got very close connections to community, and so we're very lucky to be able to source vitamin C through the Kakadu plum. But Kakadu plum is becoming extremely popular with skincare.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely booming. And funny enough, I think if you look at skincare, if you look at Korean as a leader in that space, just through investment and how much it's a priority to them, shiitake mushroom, you'll see in a lot of ingredients in shiitake skincare. And
and topical stuff too.
Yeah,
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So not just ingesting it.
No, exactly. So the shiitake is very popular there, and the Kakadu plum is becoming very popular there as well.
Okay, going back to lion's mane.
Yeah.
So there's the REM sleep part of it. Then there's the thing that's become now quite, famous thanks to Paul, is it Stamets or Stamets? Stamets. Going on Joe Rogan a couple times.
Yeah.
And that show just gets so many eyes and ears on it, and talking about the famous Paul Stamets stack, which is the microdosing of psychedelic mushrooms, 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams, and not a discernible psychoactive effect where you're tripping on mushrooms, but more of a nootropic thing. And then he figured out the certain amount of niacin, and also adding lion's mane to that stack adds to the potency and the general effect for brain health, and just, making you alert and creative and all that. And that's a stack that I personally love. I do it probably 3 days a week, 4 days a week, take a couple days off. I don't there's like a very specific schedule you're supposed to follow with it, which I always forget. So I just do it randomly and make sure I don't do it every day because you build up a tolerance to the psilocybin and then it's pointless. But do you know anything about the relationship between the psychedelic mushrooms in a microdose and the lion's mane? Because I found that taking the particular formula that I was able to procure from an unnamed source, which is this amazing tincture that has all these medicinal mushrooms and niacin and the psilocybin. But I'll do that, and then I'll take like a mega doses of your lion's mane, and I'm on fire, man. Like my brain is just, I'm so alert and in such a great mood and just extremely focused and creative. My brain just loves that combo. So what do you know about the psychedelic end of mushrooms as it pertains to mixing it with lion's mane?
Yeah, I mean, they're both, and as Paul mentioned on that show with Joe Rogan, like the closest thing you can get to that psychedelic mushroom or microdosing is the lion's mane. And so if you compound them together, they both activate, those nervous system and neurogenesis within the brain and unlock the doors, allowing each part of the brain to talk to each other. And so on, I guess, a level right now, lion's mane does that on its own. Psilocybin, the compound within the magic mushroom, does that as well for a more profound effect. And so you combine those together. You combine those together with the niacin, which is sort of the ability to get into those deep, finer, more intricate nerve endings, allows for a deeper connection. And so those three are sort of, as Paul talks about, is allowing that focus. And you're seeing that as well with the lion's mane and the psilocybin. And so, well, why is that occurring? Because of that effect of unlocking different parts of your brain, allowing them to talk to each other. So you're on fire because you're activating more of your brain rather than running dormant at 15 to 25% of our capacity, which is pretty much what we're doing most days.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm a big fan, and I'm looking forward to more research and more product development in this area because I think that it just, can help so many people who have become dim-witted due to the tainted food supply and the water supply and pollution and EMFs and all these things that are fighting against us and the inoculations we get when we're babies, and just the human body and specifically the brain is just completely getting its ass kicked by the time you're a 49-year-old guy like me, and then self-induced brain abuse too through partying and whatnot.
Yeah.
I use the term partying loosely. At a certain point for many of us, it's not a party anymore, but a necessity that's also very self-destructive. But point being is our brains are really getting hammered so badly. So I'm looking forward to more developments in the mushroom world, whether they be psychedelic, lion's mane, and combinations and new sort of formulae that can help upgrade the brain.
And also something that doesn't have a lag effect or, you're stealing from tomorrow to pay for today in terms of a lot of nootropics or other, pharmacological products out there that may be doing that. And so we need to be finding, natural solutions that aren't doing that and have a, longevity to them, which in many ways we don't necessarily know until we go down that journey because you don't know what you're going to find out. But I guess going back to what makes sense in terms of these mushrooms, in terms of lion's mane mushroom as well, we know that it's having an amazing benefit now and it's available now, and it's something that, personally I believe everyone over 50, over 45 should be on lion's mane. I think actually everyone should be on lion's mane as a base. And across a lot of these mushrooms.
I mean, imagine just like for kids too, dude, like when a kid's brain is developing, and that neurogenesis, meaning the birthing of new neurons in the brain is happening on its own. Imagine, and I'm not recommending as a parent that you do this, like check with your health provider. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, completely armchair scientist, but not the psychedelic mushrooms, I would say, but with the lion's mane, imagine when like a kid's brain is malleable and growing and taking in new information and they're walking around in this beautiful theta state of creativity and imagination. If you're assisting that with something like lion's mane, it could be really profound.
Absolutely. And this is sort of a conversation around evolution and how do we optimize health. And this is what you're the master of in terms of biohacking. How do we do that? How do we zoom out to go, hang on, what's happened over the last 100,000 years, 10,000 years, and which direction are we heading in?
Well, I think that's what's so fascinating in that Fantastic Fungi film is the hypothesis of the what's what they call it, the psychedelic ape or whatever, right?
That stoned ape hypothesis.
Yeah, that's what it is. The stoned ape hypothesis. Terrence and Dennis McKenna and this whole thing. Who knows if that's actually true? I don't know if there's conclusive evidence to support that per se, but I know not so much on the lion's mane tip, but I was talking to someone last night just around the very first time that I very unintentionally took LSD, which is just, I think, on my 17th birthday, and I just wanted to get fucked up. You know, I took a hit of acid in home ec class, which is probably not the ideal set and setting, or it came on in home ec. So here's how you put the Tupperware in your kitchen, and it's all kind of melting in my hands. But then, went to a party afterward, and I remember just standing on the porch. This is in Colorado, and I was also drinking and, being just a dumbass teenager also. But I remember looking up at the sky, and I just went, oh my God, I'm so insignificant. And it was just the most hilarious thing I'd ever, the realization of just like how meaningless my dumb little problems and micro dramas and all of these things were, and how I was just beyond smaller than a grain of sand in the great scheme of things. And then, whatever passed out came to, and have never been the same just from that one moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's so interesting about the world of psychedelics, and specifically as they pertain to mushrooms. And that was not even trying, that was an accidental awakening that stuck with me forever, and didn't necessarily at that point change the trajectory of my life, but it definitely changed my orientation to reality moving forward. And there was no putting the genie back in the bottle in terms of how I perceive reality. And some years later, I did in fact have, which I didn't realize at the time, but quite a profound spiritual experience by taking copious amounts of mushrooms. Again, just trying to party and have fun, and had kind of a, oh shit, I need to change my life moment, And so I think the way that this kingdom interacts with our brain is really fascinating, and I'm excited about what research and development has to offer. That said, are you guys poised at all in terms of your R&D into moving into the psychedelic mushroom space as things become, the legality of it becomes more loose, as we're seeing now in Oakland and Denver and different places? There's churches or clinical applications of using psilocybin that are becoming more acceptable.
Everyone sort of, awakening to the mushroom church, which is sort of this impending, legalization that will take place at some point. But for us, from a company point of view, we have that vertical integration. We understand intimately how to grow mushrooms, how to extract to the highest quality. And so it definitely makes sense to be involved in that space at some point. We have conversations at the moment with universities and colleges in both Europe and in the US at the moment, so they're ongoing. And so looking at that research, and it's just such a wide range of applications, in terms of PTSD, in terms of depression, in terms of mental health, in terms of human optimization, in terms of so many areas, in terms of healing, in terms of perspective and insight. It's very exciting for humanity as a whole, the whole area, and as it develops. And I guess it sort of got shut down in the 60s and 70s, and we sort of, I think in some ways put our own evolution on pause from doing that. But again, we need to make sure we're doing it in the right setting, in the right environment, and how that's done. Because as you mentioned, you sort of just had a random trip, but it changed your perspective. And so what happens if it's used intentionally and medicinally in the right way, in the right setting, then what can we gain from that?
Yeah, in that film, they're showing psychiatrists using psilocybin journeys as a means by which to help people with depression and PTSD and things like this. And it was so interesting to watch that, because they lay back on the, kind of the classical psychiatrist couch, put on an eye mask, and they're, kind of holding their hand and guiding them through and waiting for the dose to kick in. And I'm like, God, aside from ayahuasca, I've never done a psychedelic with that much intention or a guide and sort of a caring, safe environment like that. And I thought, wow, that would be so interesting. I've not taken like recreational psychedelics at all in a long time. Yeah. I thought, wow, it would be really interesting to do a nice hero's dose of psilocybin intentionally at some point in nature and in the right setting, whether it be ceremonial or led by a guide of some sorts. I bet there's so much insight and healing potential there to be explored.
I think so. And I mean, it's just sort of those fundamental reports that you hear around ego dissolution, perspective and insight. And I think, ego dissolution is a very important one at the moment for humanity and where we're up to, and the capitalistic nature in which we are signed up to, and very much, we're always reporting on GDP. We're reporting on numbers that really don't matter so much in the scheme of things now. So we need to change those metrics. So we need to change our point of view and our perspective. And how can we do that? And maybe those psychedelics can play a role in that. I think so. And I think the sacred use in which they've been used for thousands of years, it's very important that that's, I guess, honored and respected, and not these things treated as necessarily always a party drug to be taken, at Coachella or at Burning Man. They have those elements to them, but we're not really getting the full potential out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I left out the 50 other times I did psychedelics and got nothing out of it except maybe a good time, followed by, a harsh come down in the parking lot of a Grateful Dead show or something. But moving into culturally and economically speaking, and kind of, I guess, we'll segue out of the medicinal benefits of mushrooms. And I'm also very interested in something that you guys seem to be going into and pioneering, would be ecological and environmental uses of mushrooms. So let's talk about some of those things, ways to mitigate pollution, clean up oil spills, alternatives for plastic, things like this. Like, give me where you think this is going, where we are right now. What are some of the potentials as your long-term vision? Yeah,
I guess we've sort of just whiteboarded what are the big issues, and not being too biased on mushrooms. Where can mushrooms play a role? And being wrapped up in the world of mushrooms and the kingdom, it's like, well, they can solve so many things. And so what are high on the priority list? And one that's not necessarily spoken about a lot is antimicrobial resistance and resistance to antibiotics, and the breeding of superbugs being an enormous issue for, I guess, a threat to humanity in terms of, getting viral infections and bacterial infections that spread and not able to be stopped, almost like a wildfire. And we already know that over the next 10 years, the expectation of how many people will die from antimicrobial resistance, which is resistance to antibiotics, which is a life-saving drug and is very essential for end-stage disease and cases where it's required, not being able to be effective anymore because of the micro amounts that we're exposed to with antibiotics, which is coming through our honey, through fish, through chicken, through animal agriculture, but also through plants as well. There's a lot of antibiotics used in plant crops and things like that. So our exposure to other toxins also now includes micro levels of antibiotics. And so what we've been working on for the last 3 years, really across bees, across fish, across a number of other animals, is working intimately with farmers, commercial operations, to replace the need for antibiotics or minimize the need for antibiotics, because again, what point do they serve? They serve as sort of an end point of how do we just control this disease. It's not a preventative point of view. So with one product that we have called Bee Immunity, which is for bees, we've been working with hives across Australia. We did a trial in Quebec, Canada, where we were able to show that by using our mushroom and bush food extracts, so bush foods are the kakadu plum and other native ingredients, we're able to show an increase in bee lifespan by 8.22%. And for a healthy beehive, bee population is very important. Colony health is very important, because bees all play a very different role. They're all very much committed to the health of the hive, and they work very harmoniously and as a community. And so if you have a low population, that really lowers the resilience to hives. But also, other than that, bees are getting destroyed by monoculture cropping, by pesticide use, and by disease. And so bees are up against it. We know bees are very important. And a lot of the time, beekeepers are, what do they have in their toolbox to use? The only real thing they have at the moment is antibiotics. And so we've seen great results there. We've seen great results in other animal industries. And so that's exciting. And again, we only learned recently the amount of antibiotics used in plants and crops there as well. So that's one of our key pillars of our business as a division, is solving that one, and we're getting great results there.
The bee thing is huge, because I think more and more people are becoming aware of this, and I covered it in an episode I did. Don't have the number in front of me, but we'll put it in the show notes with Carly Stein, the CEO of Beekeepers Naturals, one of my, well, not one of my absolute favorite bee product company. And a show sponsor, I unabashedly promote all the time because I have like
product.
5 jars of it in my kitchen. I eat it just about every day. It's kind of my nighttime snack. Yeah. It's like my nighttime snack. Like a teaspoon of that honey really helps with my sleep.
Yeah.
And then I do the propolis spray right when I wake up, and I never get colds. It's amazing. But anyway, talking to her and learning a bit more about bees, and there was a documentary I think called "The Vanishing of the Bees," if I'm not mistaken. And I think many people don't realize like how much the human race is dependent upon bees. Like, in other words, if bees just all drop dead today, we're gone.
Yeah.
Like, our food supply is just gone, period. We're over. And I'm not someone that is necessarily into activism. And I think if human beings are meant to expire and not be on the planet anymore, if that's God's will, then let's go. Like the dinosaurs did, fine.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be at our hands if possible.
Exactly. We have a choice. We have a choice.
If there's a meteor and like humans are meant to be gone, okay, fine. I'm sure there's many other planets with humanoids on them in the ever expanding infinite universe. But the bee thing is really a concern because of their integral role in pollination of our food supply, right? And so now we have 5G, we have glyphosate in the food supply. There's so many things that are like working against the bees. So I think that's a really cool thing that you guys are kind of catching on to, is going at the root of the food supply, which is the bees.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's funny how sort of things pan out in terms of, well, a lot of bees, especially in North America as well, the hives are getting shipped to almond farms for almond pollination because beekeepers get a better price for almond pollination than they do for their honey. But when they go to these almond crops, they're very heavily sprayed. And so you're losing a lot of bees in that pace. So it's sort of a very complicated cycle. And it's just, where can we impregnate mushrooms and mycelium and this as a hopeful substitute or resilience builder to their immune system, which we've been able to show that can happen. So that's an amazing area. But across the animal agriculture, there is widespread use of antibiotics, and so it's something. Again, going back to transparency with mushroom products, it's the same with our fruit and veg. It's the same with our meat, chicken, fish, honey, whatever people decide to eat. We need more transparency there, because in that way we're able to trust and we're able to know that we're not slowly killing ourselves through having these short-term wins by overusing antibiotics and then causing superbugs, which then make antibiotics not available to be used.
Terrifying zombie apocalypse shit.
Something like that. Yeah. It's just
gnarly. That's gnarly. The one saving grace I think we have with that is ozone. Mm-hmm. Ozone trumps it kills all bacteria, fungus, etc. But it's also, there's not a lot of profit in the use of ozone, so it's not something that's widely used, at least in the United States, medically. But that's always the thing I think about when it comes to the antibiotic resistance. It's like, well, nothing's resistant to ozone. Like it kills everything. So I love to use that. But anyway, what about the future of, like we see so much in the hemp industry where there's potentials where you can make a car out of hemp and, replace plastics and aluminum and things that are going to eventually end up back in our ecosystem as pollution and landfills. What are some of the things being made from mushrooms now, or that you see potentially could be made in terms of just the utilitarian use of this substance? Yeah,
I mean, one great company, I think out of New York, Ecovative, doing mushroom building blocks, mushroom insulation for household insulation, and other aspects of replacing things like styrofoam, which don't break down for hundreds of years, which a lot of food is transported in styrofoam boxes all around the place to supermarkets and to grocery stores from farmers and from wholesalers and things like that. And so replacing styrofoam, replacing any of those fossil fuel-based production, ingredients, which then become very hard to break down over a long period of time. Mushrooms, again, can be a simple solution. And I say simple very hesitantly because there's a lot of R&D required there. And there's, again, going back to what you mentioned about the profit, the economics of it have to work out for people to want to make the change. And that's why it's important to sort of, again, go back to activism as well. It's, being an activist every day with how you spend your dollars and what questions you ask the companies that you buy from and being aligned to those companies.
Oh, so then I guess by that metric, I am an activist.
Sorry.
I really do my best to not support companies that don't do it right.
Yeah, there almost needs to be a top 100 list of, and it needs to be a very thorough audit process. And they do have some of those processes in place already. But I think, again, that's where sort of things are heading. So mushroom building blocks, mushroom biomaterials is what they're called, and bioengineering. We were contacted by Ralph Lauren recently about that because of being a biotech company, and we've been playing around with mushroom leather as well. We just sort of haven't gone deeply into it because it's a big journey and a long journey. But that's something that fashion labels want now. They want to be able to source that. Unfortunately, they're not able to right now. So if anyone's out there interested in that space, they should be innovating, and there's a startup idea. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, one of the things we're also working on at the moment, yet to be released, is a mushroom burger. And so we've been, again, thinking of things in the world. Again, the amount of energy and inputs put into feeding ourselves, it's around finding solutions for that as well. And so we understand that, that meat space is, I guess, very unsustainable for the planet. And at the same time, laboratory-based meats and using soy and using all these other ingredients are also very questionable, and also
you think
a long way away from biohacking. And so we're sort of just going sideways. We're not going forward. But we do have a mushroom burger coming out early next year, which is a patented burger which has 4 ingredients, USDA organic, and we grow it in 11 days.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So
this is exciting because I think coming from the early days when I was a vegetarian, I did so because the only available meat at the time that was, at least I was aware of, was like factory farm meat, and I wasn't going to be part of that for a number of different reasons, just in terms of cruelty and the environment and the impact of negative impact on your health. But now we have kind of a blanket environmentalist point of view that says like all animal food production is bad for everyone and the planet. Many people ignoring the fact that regenerative agriculture, including plants and animals, can actually restore the planet and sequester CO2 and all of this. And then, as you said, there's meat substitutes now that are even worse for you probably than like factory farm meat.
Very inflammatory, a lot of numbers. And how is that being even produced? We're knocking down forests to produce more soy.
Right. So it's a complex issue, and one that won't be solved in the last 10 minutes of the Lifestylist podcast episode with you. But I think that's really exciting as people move forward into understanding the positive impact of regenerative farming and learning ways that we can scale that for mass food production and not just for spoiled people like me that get to go to the farmer's market and participate in that, but also in finding ways to produce food like you're talking about that is actually good for you, fast and economically viable and scalable. So if you make a mushroom burger that doesn't taste like mushrooms, make a mushroom burger that tastes like bacon, I'm in. I'll eat it every day.
Send you one. I think you're going to like it. It's not overly shroomy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. You wouldn't know that it's mushroom ingredient.
Oh, good. Because there are like mushroom burgers that are the alternative to a meat patty, and I find those to be
it's usually just a big portobello or something, or a big field mushroom, and it's
challenging. And then what about the possibilities of environmental cleanup with mushrooms? I know there's a couple great TED Talks about this kind of thing where you can use mushrooms to clean up oil spills and pesticide runoff that are ending up in the ocean and all kinds of stuff. What do you know about that, and where do you see the future of that application going?
Yeah, which is a great topic, just talking about pesticide runoff. We know the Mississippi River is just covered in glyphosate, and a lot of these main arteries and main waterways in each of our countries is really washed away and filled with a lot of glyphosate and a lot of pesticides. So it's a bit of a disaster there. And so mushrooms, again, at their core, are amazing at breaking down compounds, both what we would perceive as harmful, like hydrocarbons, and using them as a food source. And so they're able to digest them, and they're very intelligent in terms of adapting and creating new food sources for themselves, as they're just natural recyclers. And so for that reason, that's why they can be implemented in terms of breaking down oil spills in contaminated soil or contaminated waterways. In terms of the work that's been done there right now, there hasn't been, really a lot of traction in that space, and that probably comes back to, the business model of it. Who's investing in it and why, and maybe that piece and the science is slow, but the early signs of the science as to what we've seen from the research, from a number of different trials is that it does work. Does it have commercial application at scale? Not yet. If it gets investment and we get the right people working on it, then it definitely has merit, and it definitely is actually a very important piece of work that needs to be done, because, as I said, the Mississippi River, all of these waterways are being polluted, and it's just having such an ongoing effect, even to that glyphosate and other pesticides heading out to the oceans as well. And so, it's a very important area, and mushrooms, again, without sounding too biased, can play a key role in that that system, because it can break it down. And we know a lot of oil spills from old mining sites or from oil and gas rigs off the coast that are having leakages, even in marina bays where we're getting a lot of leakages from boats and things, just that oil contamination.
That's rad. So trippy, because you think about how mushrooms in nature, in the forest, are such an integral part of the life and death cycle, right? So you have tree dies for whatever reason, mushrooms eat it, turn it back into soil. I mean, I'm like giving a very simplified version of this. It's, I'm sure, much more complex, but that soil again gets germinated, becomes a tree again, and it just keeps going around and around. And without the mushroom as one of the inputs there, that stops.
It's really the conduit of death and life.
It's trippy, right? And just thinking about that, okay, so if we know it has the ability to do that, how many ways in which that power can be harnessed for good? It's just super cool. It's so exciting.
Yeah, and it's just, again, a more uncharted territory. It's an entire kingdom that's been left alone for a long time, and it's a lifetime's worth of work plus 4 more. There's so many mushrooms out there with so many varieties that we don't even know what they do yet.
And they're so mysterious too in the wild, because they stay hidden. They're like little aliens. Mushrooms are just trippy in the way that they don't show themselves. And I think maybe that's why they've been largely ignored until very recently by people.
The one thing that's funny that you get a lot of conversations on is, once you start to come into this world of mushrooms, you start to see them everywhere. I'm not sure if that's part of the alien effect or what, but it's
right.
But you just start to notice them, because you notice where they put on rotting logs, by nearby creeks where it's humid, where there's good, airflow and rotting logs again in that humid environment. So I think going forward, you're going to see a lot more mushrooms in your own life just creeping in.
For the home cultivator, I understand you guys, probably by the time this will have come out, are producing home cultivation kits where someone can actually grow their own.
We have a USDA organic lion's mane grow kit that will be available, and an oyster mushroom grow kit available in the US, which is exciting, and we do that also in Australia. But again, the lion's mane, making it easily accessible and connecting people to nature as a part of biohacking, rewilding, renaturing. And so what does that mean if you're living in an apartment in a city? Well, grow some food on your balcony, grow some food on your bench top. And one of those amazing things to grow is the mushrooms. And to see that life cycle of how they grow and how quickly they grow, again, is just that reconnection to something real and alive in a world where it's, a lot of things are energetically quite low within cities. How do we bring life to cities? And in a very, very simple way, these mushrooms that were grown off of coffee waste and are delicious to taste, you can grow on your kitchen bench in 14 days, and it's a very fun experience.
Awesome, man. I love it. I'm going to give it a try. Maybe
I'll
fare better than the reishi spore plugs that I tried a few years ago.
If you can't grow this lion's mane, then put the shovel down. There's no hope.
All right, cool. I'll give that a shot. In closing, who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced your work and your life that our audience might be able to go learn from?
I'm very big on mentors. It's very definitely on micro and macro levels, mentors that you've never met, that you've seen from afar and admired, and micro as well. And from a micro level, I think, very lucky with my parents, just being very unconditionally loving and letting me be free to do whatever I wish to do, which has been amazing, because I don't think necessarily people always have that support. Our chairman at Life Cykel and at our mycelium biotechnology company, William Scott, he's been a businessman that also has a spiritual, deep aspect side to him as well. So he can play in both fields, because what you find, I guess, when you're going into this business realm, it's all very black and white, profit loss, capital markets, etc., which is all very necessary and interesting. But if you can balance that with understanding the bigger picture of the life cycle of how things work, of spirituality and what that means. Then you blend those two together. He's been an amazing mentor. But I guess beyond that, from an everyday personal point of view, Marcus Aurelius and Meditations is probably what I would say is my Bible book in terms of Stoicism and in terms of just giving you perspective on death and life, on impermanence and what matters. That's been a good staple where you can just read a couple of pages every couple of days just to reground, not get lost amongst the noise and the chaos. So that's probably my go-to is that book. And beyond that, there's just been so many people from afar that you see going through their journey, going on their own mission and achieving in whatever way that means. And that's been inspiring as well. And you can name a list of people from, your Richard Bransons and your Elon Musks and, the guys at Brian Chesky at Airbnb, and all of those guys have done very interesting and great work within their field. And you find that on an everyday level with people that you meet down the street who own a cafe store, and they all have an amazing story and journey, and there's so much motivation to get from all of them. But I think also, it's just sort of learning from everyone.
Awesome, dude. Well, I've learned tons from you today. Thank you so much for joining. It's been real and also real funny in the last few minutes, because those listening, you won't know this because it would have been edited out, but Cookie, my co-host, had a barking spell, and so we shut it down and went and got the mail, which is one of the things she was barking at, in addition to the live spring water shout out delivery, which I'm grateful for. But I got some of the blue Canatine trochees, and these are kind of like just where a demo run, and so I gave one to our guest Julian and myself, and I'm watching your whole mouth turn blue because these ones dissolve. They're a little different than the real ones that are coming to market. These ones apparently dissolve much faster because within 5 minutes your whole mouth was blue. So it's going to be a funny thing for the people on video to watch. Like what just happened to this guy? His teeth are bright blue. So I've been sitting here trying not to crack up, and I've had a really great time talking to you.
Awesome.
Even apart from that. So thanks so much for coming over today. Thank you for making a freaking amazing product. Just when I think I've discovered everything, I discover something really cool, and I love what you guys are doing, and I'm so happy to support your mission, and also not just like the supplemental end of it, but the things that are to come. I think you guys are coming at it from a really innovative, far-reaching, forward-thinking point of view, which is very cool.
Awesome.
So thanks for being an awesome entrepreneur, dude, that's doing things right.
Thanks for giving us the biohacking knowledge that we need.
Absolutely. I'll see you soon.
See you. Bye.
I don't know if this happens to you as the listener, but as the host of these shows, every time we talk about a particular healing modality or product or practice, whether it be a meditation or a medicinal mushroom, I become obsessed after talking to someone like Julian, and I want to try out their stuff. And I mentioned this in the intro, but just to give it to you again, if that's the case for you and you're like, whoa, this sounds awesome, I want to scope it, you can go to lifecykel.com. That's LIFECYKEL, lifecykel.com. Enter the code LukeSave20 and get 20% off. And of course, I definitely endorse these products. They're freaking amazing. So I want to make sure and mention that again. Then we've got a great show coming up this Friday. It's going to be another solo Q&A show. And this time I'm going to be covering a very frequent and highly popular request, which is biohacking, air travel, and jet lag, which I've been, some of you know, I've been sitting on an online class covering all that for, about a year and a half. And I don't know, man, there's just so many other things going on. I just never get around to it. Someday I hope to do that. I know some of you are on the wait list. It's embarrassing that I announced it and then didn't finish it, but it is what it is. It's an exercise in accepting my imperfection and sometimes lack of follow through when it comes to the technicality. So what I'm going to do instead is give you guys a free in-depth biohack your travel session on this Friday's show. I'm also going to talk about how to safely harvest spring water. So both of these topics are something I humbly, admit that I know quite a bit about, and I'm really excited to share that information with you. Then on Tuesday, We've got a double episode. We've got 2 shows that day coming out with my friend Aaron Alexander, who's a fantastic guy and also one of the top movement experts in the world, meaning fitness, but from the standpoint of natural or ancestral or primal movement. And those episodes are called The Philosophy of Physicality, a conversation with movement master Aaron Alexander. And then that day we'll also be dropping the Aaron Alexander bonus show, which is a live audience Q&A that he and I recorded at an undisclosed location in Malibu, California. So we've got a show coming Friday. Tons of value for you. And again, on Tuesday, we've got a couple upcoming events, Paleo FX, April 24th through 26th. And then Meet Delic, May 2nd and 3rd in Los Angeles. And you can find those at lukestory.com/events. And again, for the newsletter, text the word lifestylist to the number 44222. To easily join the newsletter using a browser, go to lukestory.com/newsletter. First off, I want to thank you for listening to this episode and every other episode. I want to thank our sponsors, without whom this episode and all of the others would be impossible, because homie can't work for free after 3.5 years of doing this show. And these guys pay the bills around here. So Beekeepers Naturals, you can go to beekeepersnaturals.com, use the code Lifestylist and save 15% off. I used their bee products. I used some honey last night, and I put some honey in my friend's matcha tea this morning. By the way, it was the Four Sigmatic matcha tea. I might as well just give them a little shout out there because they're also one of our sponsors. If you want to try Four Sigmatic products, I talk about them a lot. My very favorite product, I think, from Four Sigmatic is the coffee, as was mentioned in one of the plugs in this episode. The instant coffee with lion's mane is just freaking delicious. It's potent. It's mold-free. It's organic. It's just absolutely incredible. And what I like about the Four Sigmatic coffee the best is that it's so portable. Oftentimes when I'm traveling, I can't bring along a French press and a coffee grinder and do the whole thing with my Zen Bunny coffee or my Kion coffee, which are the 2 coffee bean coffees that I drink typically. They're both amazing, by the way. You can find them and all the products at lukestory.com/store. But anyway, Beekeepers Naturals is a great complementary product to use with something like a Four Sigmatic coffee. So there you go. You can go to foursigmatic.com/the Lifestylist and save 15% off there with the code the Lifestylist. And last but certainly not least, to keep our gut thriving, we've got Just Thrive. They make a great probiotic product that's spore-based, meaning it survives the treachery of going down your throat and all of the acids and havoc that your gut is going to wreak on regular, whack, useless probiotics. If you go to thriveprobiotic.com/Luke, you can hook yourself up with some of their stuff. They also have a great prebiotic product and an immune support product that I just took an entire bottle of to get over the cold. It was freaking awesome. My cold was pretty mild and short-lived. It might have had something to do with the Thrive probiotic products. At thriveprobiotic.com/Luke, you can use the code Luke15 to save yourself 15% off. If all of those URLs were just too much for you to handle, you can find every product I personally use and represent or am an affiliate for or that sponsor the show, etc. over at lukestory.com/store. And by shopping over there, you support the show, you support some great companies, and also get yourself some exclusive discounts. Almost everything on my site has some kind of discount or hookup on it. So I feel very pleased to be able to share that with you. And I work really hard to curate the best of the best and put them all in the store in a neatly organized fashion. So thank you for visiting lukestory.com/store and doing your part to support us. And if you don't want to do anything to support the show, guess what? You already are, because you're hearing my voice right now. And that's the most important thing. Just keep listening and learning and growing and healing, which is the true mission of this podcast. Always has been, always will be. I'm Luke Story. Thanks for joining me.